Okay. So for our next retiree, Russ Walto, MDTA Administrator 6. Whereas Russ Walto began his career with Maryland Transportation Authority as an Engineer Associate 1 on May 28, 1980, and whereas Mr. Walto continued to progress in engineering field and became an Engineer Associate 2 on May 14, 1981, Engineer Associate 3 on May 14, 1982, and whereas continuing in the engineering field, Mr. Walto held many titles over his 41-year state career, including engineering technician and highway engineer, and progressed through the Transportation Engineer Series from 1982 to 2005, respectively. And whereas with the knowledge and dedication, Mr. Walto was promoted to Transportation Engineering Manager 1 on January 30th, 2008, and to MDTA Administrator 6 on November 22, 2017, a title held until retirement. And whereas he is an invaluable member of the team, one who managed countless planning projects throughout his career, and his co-workers expressed the fact that his thoughtfulness, dedication, jovial personality, and calm demeanor will be missed. And they hope his retirement is filled with endless golf games on the links. That's the first time I've seen that. Now, therefore, be resolved on the occasion of Russ Walto's retirement from his distinguished career of exemplary service, the chairman and members of the Maryland Transportation Authority Board hereby express to Mr. Walto their most sincere appreciation for his excellence and commitment, and be it further resolved that this resolution be entered into the minutes of the MDTA Board August 26, 2021, and a copy appropriately framed be presented to Mr. Walto as an expression of MDTA Board appreciation and esteem. And I also have to present this. It's a State of Maryland Certificate of Service awarded to Russell Walto in appreciation of 40 years of faithful service to the people of Maryland. And that is dated December 31st, 2020. Obviously, you know, COVID, so you're getting it now. And of course, he's got 41 years now. So anyway, congratulations, Russ. Best of luck, and come on up and we'll take a picture.
Congratulations, Russ. Russ and I worked on a lot of projects over the years together.
There you go, Russ. I had a 40-year pin.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Put that on.
Yeah.
There's a color.
I know.
Here you got the, there you go. Oh, yep.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Just like before, we're gonna take a couple. We got everyone, 1, 2, 3. Do one more, 1, 2.
Got it?
All right.
Good.
Right.
Congratulations.
Lots of practice.
Okay.
They're the only ones?
That's it.
Okay. All right, good deal. Thank you, Jim. Our next item on the agenda is Jim again, but it's
Play a big
to
role
walk
today.
us through an approval of some items with the Canton Railroad.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this agenda item is to seek approval from Maryland Transportation Authority Board of the proposed Canton Develop Corporation, Inc. Board of Directors, the continuation of Bill Hellman as Board Chairman, and to designate MDTA's Chief Financial Officer or her designee as a proxy.
Hold on one second.
Director reports. Member Cox needs to recuse himself from this item.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah, she leave.
bye-bye.
Stay away from the cook. Thank you.
Yeah, because we're gonna have plenty.
He's looking for the cookies
We're gonna
now.
have plenty of questions about him. Look at. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Let's see, or her designee as proxy to attend the annual meeting of stockholders of Canton on September 29, 2021, to vote to approve the election of the Canton Board of Directors. And so what we're doing today, MDTA, as you know, is a major stockholder of the Canton. So the day-to-day operations are managed by Mr. John Magnus, the president, CEO. with the oversight of the Board of Directors per the bylaws of Canton. The stockholders are to gather annually and elect members of the board. Mr. Magnus has provided the MDTA with proper notice of the upcoming annual meeting of stockholders to be held on September 29, 2021. Per the bylaws, the only matter in which the stockholders have the authority to vote on is the election of members to Canton's Board of Directors. Additionally, the bylaws of the Canton permit the stockholders to be presented by proxy. So what you're here to do today is a sole stockholder of Canton. The MDTA must vote on the election of members of Canton's Board of Directors at Canton's annual meeting. Currently, the Canton Board consists of 7 directors, including MDTA board member who serves as the ex officio capacity. The directors serve 3-year terms and are staggered, resulting in the election of 2 or 3 directors a year. Miss Lori Shenning and Mr. William Cox. Bill Cox is the ex officio terms that are slated to expire. The MDTA recommends the reappointment of Ms. Shenning and Mr. Cox. Their new term would expire in the fall of 2024. Mr. Hellman strongly endorsed the reappointments of Ms. Shenning and Mr. Cox. He indicated the MDTA board has provided Canton with an extremely strong board that includes the needed expertise and allows the board to efficiently discuss any matter. Mr. Cox also strongly endorses Ms. Shenning and emphasized her strong financial background. So with that, we ask you that approve.
Thank you, Jim. I just
The
want
members.
to be clear, kind of a question. Are we voting on the reappointment of Ms. Shenning and Mr. Cox as well as the continuation of Bill Hellman?
Yes.
Okay.
As far as I know,
Great.
that's the case, yes. So I know you may have some questions about Mr. Cox.
Yeah.
but-
Lots of them.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. They're all fine individuals that really serve us well.
I have to admit, we do really have a strong
We do.
board.
We do.
It is really, the members are really active, and actually, Bill, I will say this about Bill Cox. He is extremely attentive at these meetings and has brought things to our attention, and I think he's done a terrific job on that
Absolutely.
board.
Couldn't agree more, and I know him and Bill both reach out to me when there's something that they want to
Mhm.
make sure that have my eyes on and be able to kind of walk through stuff. So
Mhm.
it's absolutely helpful, and I fully support. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
This is Mary. I'll move to approve.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
I text them. Jay, I text them.
Huh?
I text them.
Oh, did you text him? Okay.
Great, motion carries, then everyone is reappointed and continued. So great, congratulations and thank you all for your service.
All right. You made it by 1 vote, Bill.
I'm sure it wasn't yours.
I don't get the vote.
It may have been your own vote. All right, thank you. At this point, we'll turn it over to, I'm sorry. At this point, we'll turn it over to Donna to walk through our contracts.
Good morning, everyone. The first contract is MR 3025, the on-call structural repairs and miscellaneous modifications. We are seeking contingent approval pending the approval of the MBE and VSBE plans and signed contracts. This contract was advertised in April of 2021. It has a calendar duration of 1,095 days. We received 3 bids. There was an MBE goal of 19% and without sub-goals, and a 2% VSBE goal. We're recommending award to Bronner Builder in the amount of $8,122,018.20. In that their bid was less than 31%, less than our engineer's estimate. A bid justification was conducted and determined to be fair and reasonable. We have not received any protest on this contract, and we're seeking contingent approval. Are there any questions?
No questions from me. They do outstanding work. I've had a lot of great experiences with them over the years. Have a
This
motion?
is Mary. I'll move for approval.
I'll second. No.
Okay. All those in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any discussion? Great. Motion carries. Contract approved. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you. The next contract is KB 3013, which is for the Police Training Center site development. Again, this is contingent approval pending the approved MBE and VSBE plans. We received 4 bids on May 4th of 2021, and this contract had a 28% MBE goal and a 0.5% VSBE goal. We're recommending award to Old Line Construction. Their bid was less than 3% lower than the engineer's estimate, so no bid justification was required. They are exceeding the VSBE goal and exceeding the MBE goal. There were no protests on this contract.
Move for approval.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any further discussion? Motion carries. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you. The next item is an informational item for the board. This is to update you on the transfer of the remaining former Maryland House Travel Plaza mural scene depicting Francis Scott Key in front of the U.S. flag. As you'll know, in the past, we've had 7 other vignettes that we have found homes for. We have worked over the years with the family to see what they wanted to do. They did not want to accept these back. Obviously, they're very large vignettes and panels. I don't think they could hang them in their living room. So we did work with the family, and we were very successful at finding homes for the other vignettes. And for this one, last remaining one, we are going to gift this vignette to the Maryland Commission on Artistic Property. In that this is a piece of property, we have to take this to the Board of Public Works, which we plan to do in October.
What is the commission? I wasn't familiar with that group.
The Maryland Commission on Artistic Property of the
Yeah.
Maryland State Archives.
Oh, okay, so they're part of the archives.
Part of,
Yeah,
Great,
part of the archives.
great.
Yeah.
Yes,
We thought that was the appropriate
Yeah, I think
place.
that sounds great.
yeah.
I agree.
So this is an informational item, so it'll go to the Board of
For
Public
our board, it's
Works.
informational item. Because it's property, it's required to go to the Board of
Okay,
Public Works.
but it doesn't require our board approval. Okay,
We're finalizing the deed of gift.
great,
So once that's finalized, we'll take it to DPW.
great. Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
I think you're up again with the procurement
I am
report
up
on
again.
open contracts.
My final report in accordance with Resolution 1906 is a quarterly report on our open contracts. Currently, we have 227 open contracts, which consist of various MOUs, architect and engineering, construction-related, maintenance, services, and IT contracts. We have a total contract amount of, we'll just do this in numbers, $2,757,000 estimate. We won't go into all the pennies. And we have vouchered $1.5 million. We have obligated $856 million. And we have open contract balance of $360 million. I can break these all down for you. We've got a report of every single contract, but just to summarize where we are, that complies with our resolution to report to the board of all our open contracts.
Great, thank you, Donna. Any questions from members of the board? Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to turn it over to, we are moving fast. We're going to turn it over to Alan to talk us through our TIFIA financing for the nice Middleton Bridge, which
Great.
I will comment is moving along in construction really, really well.
It's funny, we drove down to Virginia on vacation, and I hadn't crossed the nice bridge in 20 years,
Right.
at least. And I was so excited, and I was talking to my family in the car. I'm like, look at those big piers out there. And I think they were a little excited because I was excited, so it was fun to see.
Do you do what I do and like drive across country and critique guardrails and bridges? My wife
definitely
looks
think-
like she's ready to punch me at the time.
So this resolution, it's been a 2-year process so far with the Build America Bureau, and so it's quite lengthy and it's dragged on for a long time, and so we've had to come back with resolutions. Normally our financing resolutions, we kind of wrap them up and we give ourselves sufficient leeway, but we're simply back to extend this resolution that permitted us to execute the TIFIA loan. It expires this month, and we'd like to extend it to December 31st. If you recall, and to refresh everyone's memory, we submitted a letter of interest in August of 19 The Bureau then invited us into the credit review process that December, and so we've spent more than a year and a half in the credit review process. So we're essentially through that. The credit committee finally approved us. We're, as you all may recall, we're the highest rated toll road among only 5 in the nation. So it took us a year and a half, but a lot of that was in negotiation of the loan terms to make sure that they aligned with our trust agreement. So it's been challenging with the Bureau. So in theory, we're through the credit review process. The final 2 or 3 steps are that the credit council needs to approve us. That's supposed to happen this month. So we're hoping that gets finalized this month. And then the Secretary of Transportation would need to sign off, and apparently OMB needs to sign off as well and like apportion the funding for the loan. So that's where we're at. And the loan's essentially approximately $200 million. It's about a third of the financing for the Nice Bridge. We've structured it so that we'll draw all of that money around January of 2023. And it's approximately a 30-year financing. The benefits of the TIFIA loan are that we get financing at Treasury rates, and most importantly is that the Bureau looks like they're going to allow us to backload some of that debt service so that we can wrap that around a muni financing where we front load the muni financing. In theory, that's a possibility for us. And the big benefit there is that for the Treasury rate financed loan with the Bureau, there's no sort of penalty for a call provision, so we can refinance it at any time. Whereas with the muni bonds, we've got like a 10-year call provision in there, and then we have to pay a higher yield for that call provision. And so that's one of the benefits here with the TIFIA loan.
Rate-wise, I guess rate-wise on TIFIA, as you were just pointing out with the Treasury rates, is that variable or is it fixed?
It's fixed, and that's the hurry always for me is trying to lock that in. So,
Right.
In March, in February, March, rates started to shoot up, and
Right.
I think I was before the board saying, "Oh my God, I'd love for us to be able to lock." And then, Delta hit, and the rates have come back down a bit. So the 30-year Treasury is less than 2% again.
Right.
And our old loan, we had locked it in back in 2008 at roughly 2.5%, which back then was the lowest ever for the 30-year Treasury.
Neat.
The one thing that we've negotiated this time also is that rather than being tied purely to that 30-year Treasury rate, we're going to split this loan into 5 tranches. And so we'll have a piece financed at the 30-year rate and another at, like, say, a 25-year rate, a 10-year rate, a 5-year rate. So we get benefit of the lower rates for shorter portions of that loan.
Nice.
So that should be
Very good.
beneficial for us.
That's great. One thing I've been really watching is the interest rates on a variety of projects. Could really swing the economics on some of these things.
Right.
I would just like to comment. I recognize and certainly commend the MDTA team for their hard work. I mean, almost an 18-month process here, and in negotiating some good terms for on behalf of MDTA. And I thank you. I just want to recognize that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll second that. And I was just wondering, so the TIFIA loan we hope is going to be under 2. What are we paying on muni rates now?
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah,
recent financings have been some of the lowest that we've ever
Right.
done because of the pandemic. And so, we're in like the 2 to 3% range
2 to
for
3.
some of these financings.
So
You
we'll save a half to 1% maybe?
We think so.
What's been interesting to watch in TIFIA is, for years, they were really not supportive of refinancing projects. And I've seen them refinance a handful of really large projects across the country in the last year or so at the better rate, saving government agencies a lot of money. So great, thank you. So any further questions from the board? Do you have a motion to approve the extension?
I'll make the motion.
So moved. Member Rosen.
Member Von Paris here.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion carries. Thank you, Alan.
Great, thank you.
We move on with Alan again for the debt policy.
So this is our annual review of the debt policy that's required by the policy itself. And so it's evolved and been, refined over many years. And so I think it's, very well in structure overall. We've got a little table here that highlights some of the key sections. And the policy is essentially derived from some of the state law, legal requirements also in our trust agreement, and then board directives over the years. And so that's all incorporated in this policy.
Participants are waiting in the lobby. To admit all participants in the lobby, press *21.
Should I do that? No. Okay. So, if you refer to the table, you'll see there's some state law references in section 1. Some of the really key elements are our unrestricted cash target of $350 million, the debt limit that's in state law, and the debt service coverage target. Those elements really are the foundation of us holding that AA credit rating, and along with some of these other elements in here. And I think one of the most interesting things to point out is that we went through this pandemic. You all understood the magnitude of the revenue decline. We tapped into unrestricted cash to manage between financings, but we held our credit ratings. So I think that's a testament to the strength of the policies in here and maintaining our credit rating through the most severe crisis, that I can imagine in terms of a revenue decline.
Yeah, and I don't know that other tolling entities across the nation were as fortunate.
So within the debt policy, I think we just didn't have any changes. We also reviewed it with one of our outside municipal advisors, so we don't have any recommended changes at this time. We did review it with the full finance committee, and they recommended that it move forward to the board for approval.
So just a recommendation for a continuation of the existing policy.
Yes.
I'll make a recommendation to that effect.
I'll second that. Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Great, motion carries. Thank you, Alan. And Alan up again with our quarterly review of our investment strategy.
They must have structured me here together to save me up back and forth to the table.
I'm gonna crack this door, see if I can get some air.
So this is our quarterly review of investment performance. So we look at trailing 12-month performance. The key elements are that the board is looking to see that we maintain strategy in line with the board-approved strategy, and we have, and also that there are no investment policy violations, so there are no violations. And then the other key element is that the performance for the portfolio, particularly the longer-term accounts, should be in line with our chosen benchmarks. So I can assure you that that's in line with the benchmark as well. So unfortunately, we're subject to market movements in the bond market, and so returns are coming down. As we've communicated to the board, was that as interest rates declined, we had some substantial price appreciation associated with mark-to-market for 2 years. And now, with rates bottoming and starting to rise, the opposite effect is, so as rates have risen, the mark-to-market is negative. So we have, negative price movements being somewhat offset by the yield on those portfolios or the income coupon component. So we have, come back to earth, so to speak, with very modest returns that are reflective of the low rate environment. As a refresher, we have, for the general account, which is our largest portfolio of approximately $300 million, we use a benchmark that's 1 to 5 year U.S. government agencies, and so our performance should track relatively closely with that. That portfolio is structured with maturities between essentially 3 months out to 5 years. For the M&O reserve, we had come to the board with a proposal to extend that duration just before the pandemic, and we came back to the board and said, we'd rather not do that just as we've hit these all-time low record interest rates. We don't want to reposition that entire portfolio. So the board approved us holding off on that, and then we came back a few months ago and reinstituted that. So we've been gradually extending duration on that portfolio, but we've been a little hesitant because of the sharp rise in rates could turn that return negative. For our portfolios, we either use a matched funding investment approach. So for our capital accounts and bond service accounts and operating accounts, investment maturities are very short and they're just matched to the projected outflows. And then for the total return accounts, for the general account and the M&O reserve that make up that $350 million position, we manage them on total return. So we're accepting some greater return volatility in exchange for expected higher average annual returns. So for the trailing 12 months, the general account's total return was 20 basis points, so 0.2%, and that was very much in line with the index's return of 0.1%. So that deviates from what you saw for 2 years where we had returns in the 4 to 5% range, but that was all, mark to market as rates just cratered. So this is more in line with what we're going to see, in the next couple of years as, sort of rates are bottomed and then potentially could rise. We're continuing to transition that M&O reserve account. We think maybe we can get that done in the next couple of months. So when we met with the finance committee, we asked for approval to continue with the same strategy, matched funding for all of the capital, operating, bond service accounts, and then the same two benchmarks for the general account and M&O reserve.
Alan, what do you think our biggest risk items are in this world in the next year?
So from the investment portfolio perspective, I think what we've communicated to the board was to take a long view. So
Right.
we report to the finance committee really detailed month-to-month returns, and you'll see negative 1% returns some months and positive 1% returns. And the focus for the board is try to look at multi-year returns, not even a single year, but look at multi-year. And so from this agency's perspective, you're going to see potentially negative returns on that $350 million portfolio some years, not majorly negative because the portfolios are still relatively short duration, so they're not as volatile as, say, like a portfolio with a 15-year average maturity. But it's an acceptance and recognition that over the long term we'll have slightly higher average returns. We're trying to keep up with inflation, though we probably can't do that with a short portfolio. So the volatility is the biggest risk, is you'll see dips, and then the next year, rates will, stabilize, or you'll run into another recession and you'll get, a higher than average annual return. So I think it's the volatility is the risk for us, but fortunately that $350 million is relatively stable. Other than this year, we've not tapped into that $350 million for more than a decade, so that's not something that we normally would ever tap into. It's there to hold the credit rating. So just as we suffer from a mark-to-market decline one year, the next year we benefit from a mark-to-market gain, and that sort of replenishes that portfolio.
So the risk really for us is to make sure that we don't react too drastically to an ebb or a flow. It's to stay the course on the...
Exactly, yes.
I got a question.
Sure.
Yeah, what is the primary driver of that volatility? Would it be inflation, I guess?
I
that's
guess
most of it, I
expectations
guess.
for the market and what the Fed's doing, and
The
so,
Fed, right.
to call out what's going to happen in the next year, back in February, March, April, you're seeing rates rising by 50, 60 basis points on most of the curve.
Right.
And who would have thought that, Delta would evolve around, and then the market would immediately change its mind and say, well, maybe we're not out of this pandemic, and
Right.
maybe the Fed's not going to hike. And we've kind of laughed at the Fed over the years because they have these charts about where the Fed governors expect their own rates that they're setting to go, and they're always wrong. They're always expecting them to be higher in a few months, and they'll start hiking, but then wars happen and recessions happen and pandemics and unforeseen events.
Deficits.
And that's, I think,
And
back
deficits,
to our
yeah.
long-term kind of focus on staying the
Right.
course, maintain consistent benchmarks, don't try to time the market or guess, just, stay the course and accept some volatility for higher average annual returns.
If you have the ability to predict those things, I don't think we'll keep you long.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions from members of the board? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Just remember,
Second, a second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
I gotta give a pause. Motion carries. Thank you, Alan. I think you have one more, don't you?
Excellent. Nearing the end. So the last one is our annual review for the investment policy. It's the same as the debt policy. Within the policy, it requires an annual review by the board. So recently, we went to the full finance committee, and there is one change recommended at this time. So back in May of 20, the board approved a change to our trust agreement, and we accomplished that through a springing amendment process. And so we had 3 key changes in there, and so we have this master trust agreement that dates back to 2007, and each time we issue debt, there's a supplemental trust agreement done. And so generally that doesn't have any material changes other than the new debt. So in here, we had asked for a change to the ratings requirement to municipal bond holdings. So previously, we were limited to AAA only, and the board approved a reduction in that to allow us to buy AA rated muni bonds. And the purpose of that was twofold. One was to pick up some additional yield for what we think is a very reasonable and prudent risk. A lot of states are AA1 rated, they're just below AAA, and we can't buy them even if we can pick up some yield. And that's true of a lot of counties nationally. So we're buying some of the highest quality general obligation credits, but we couldn't dip into AA rated credits at all. And the other risk for me, going back to your point, I think was about we had a downgrade risk in this trust agreement because it didn't permit us to hold something that was downgraded. In other words, we were a forced seller. So there was one instance some years ago where we bought a AAA rated Texas county that was downgraded to AA. We couldn't legally hold it. And so we consulted with bond counsel about, are we a forced seller? And we didn't want to sell it. We thought we can hold this thing. I think it only had a couple of years to maturity. And in fact, S&P came through and they downgraded the entire sector. So multiple counties were downgraded because of that rating sort of process. So we removed that requirement. So now there's language in the trust agreement that says at time of purchase, it must be AA, which gives the board and management the discretion to hold something. If we're 6 months to maturity where we think we're comfortable holding something that's been downgraded, we're not forced to sell something at a loss. So what we're simply coming back to the board is the board already approved the trust agreement change when we refinanced our prior TIFIA loan and issued 2 separate series of new bonds in 2020 and 2021. We achieved majority bondholder essentially voting status. So it voted these amendments into the trust agreement. And now we're just coming back and saying, now we'd like to revise the investment policy to reflect those changes.
Great. Thank you, Alan. No questions from me. Any questions from members of the board? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. So make a comment, as you can
Sure.
see. We are very blessed to have Alan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because he knows his stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Now,
Aye.
did you catch the second on that one? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries.
I assume Alan's gonna take the rest of the day off now.
No, he's still got work to do.
Give you an hour.
All right, let's move on and turn it over to Christina to talk about our financial forecast.
Good morning, members and chair. Here to request approval of the updated FY '22 to '27 financial forecast. The forecast was originally approved at the July meeting. This forecast reflects an updated traffic and revenue forecast. The traffic and revenue forecast was completed early, which provided an opportunity to update the forecast prior to the required submission to Department of Legislative Services. FY '21 actual performance resulted in an improved 10-year forecast. The revised forecast also eliminates a $65 million loan to MDOT. For FY 2022 to 27, MDTA remains in compliance with its financial goals and legal standards. Through the forecast period, MDTA meets its financial goals of $350 million unencumbered cash and 2 times debt service coverage. MDTA also remains above its trust agreement rate covenant. There are no system-wide toll increases needed. Debt issued during the forecast is $1.1 billion, and the maximum outstanding debt remains below the statutory cap of $3 billion. Debt service paid over the forecast period totals $941.7 million. The primary differences between the update and the original forecast include increased revenue of $153.7 million due to stronger than anticipated commercial traffic growth and better recovery from COVID-19. There's decreased debt issuances of $258.4 million, and debt service decreased by $56.9 million due to an increase of cash available for pay-go and capital spending. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Christina. We really are recovering pretty significantly right now. You know, I might, before we kind of go into discussion, I might put Jacqueline on the spot a little bit. She's used to me doing this, but
Certainly nice to hear, Mr. Chairman, certainly nice to see you, Jack.
Isn't it great to see you? So, Jacqueline, can I ask you to do me a favor, because I think the board would benefit from it? Just give us like, I have the privilege of seeing it kind of day to day, but give us a general kind of snapshot of kind of the revenue picture statewide and how well we've recovered and the different sources that are still recovering, those types of things. I just think the board might benefit from kind of hearing that overall.
Sure, absolutely. So Jacqueline Hartman, Chief Financial Officer for the Maryland Department of Transportation. Good to see everybody again. So generally, kind of let me start at the state level real quick. This state, in the early days of the pandemic, took a very conservative estimate of how bad things were going to get and kind of a worst case scenario of how the revenues may flow. Since that time, they have revised those early revisions upward several times, and they have seen that revenues have not taken as much of a hit as expected. There was an early hard hit, but revenues have generally recovered pretty quickly and pretty strongly. We've seen a similar situation at the Maryland Department of Transportation. So in the early days, you know, when everyone is staying at home, motor fuel tax revenues were cut down significantly as cars were sitting idle in their driveways. But now as restrictions are being lifted and people are going back into the workplace, we are seeing motor fuel tax revenues recovering. We're still, our estimates at the department were, I think we took a little bit more of we tried to take a little bit more of a realistic approach rather than a worst case scenario approach than the state did. And I think we've fared pretty well in terms of our forecast compared to the revenues. So motor fuel tax revenue is starting to tick up. The kind of the real blue, the award winner so far has been the titling tax. Titling tax is performing very strongly right now. Even absent a pandemic, it's performing strongly. A lot of that is being driven by the new car or the used car sales that's happening. You know, a lot of the rental vehicle or rental companies sold off a lot of their fleets during the pandemic. Now they're trying to buy up used cars, and that is pushing up demand, and supply is running out, which pushes up prices, which then pushes up what we're getting back from the tolling tax revenue. On the operating revenue side, which includes revenues from the port, the airport, and transit, The port continued to perform well throughout the pandemic. The airport took a significant hit, but they are coming back strongly this year. We do expect that kind of going by the end of this year and into early next year, airport will be kind of back to where they were previously. Transit's going to take a lot longer to recover. We expect that recovery to go out another couple years. And then the only other pieces are in regards to some of the MBA fees, for licensing and registration renewals and all of those fees. So those have come in a little bit below expectations, mainly because of all of those extended deadlines for your licenses that were in place during the pandemic. But now that those deadline expiration or the pushed out dates have expired, we are starting to see those revenues come in now. So generally, we're in a pretty good place recovering from the pandemic. I think that, again, generally by into next year, we're going to see most revenues recovering to their 2019 levels, although transit's going to be the real drag on the revenue recovery.
Yeah, we're really starting to see the traffic come back. We're starting to see, I spent a fair amount of time in the airport the last couple of weeks and really starting to see that kind of thrive again. And the port has really got this new emerging business of exporting used cars. And so it's really kind of interesting trends, but we're doing a lot better than many other parts of the country and with our economic recovery. So any questions? I just thought the board might benefit from kind of hearing that from Jacqueline. Any questions from members of the board for either Jacqueline or Christina?
Member Rose, just a quick question in regards to for the first year in this forecast for FY22, since we are we measure this on a cash basis, does this and take into account the all the collections from prior tolls for that first year that we're working on?
Yeah, referring to FY22, yes, that is a shift of some collections of revenue from FY21.
Okay. And then also with regard to the uncertainties associated with going AET earlier than we originally had projected, so does that anticipate potential additional reserves or what our expectations are for not being able to collect more through the AET going forward?
I believe our collection rates are higher than we anticipated, and so that has been adjusted slightly in the forecast, but we had adjusted for that in the previous forecast due to the collection rates of the AET.
Yeah, great question, Member Rosen. It's one of the positives we've seen going into this remote environment is the fact that we were able to jump into AET early. One of the challenges that we've seen in this pandemic is that we had to go into AET early, so we're dealing with kind of both sides of it right now. Any further questions from members of the board? Great, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the financial forecast?
So moved.
Second?
Second, Member Von
Ariel,
Pierce.
second.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, motion carries. Thank you, Christina.
Wait just a little bit longer.
I know, I gotta give them a pause on the phone.
It sounds like they're opposed.
But I'll keep Jacqueline up and turn it over to Jim and Jacqueline for last approval item of the morning, which is the trust agreement, the master trust agreement for the public-private partnership financing.
We might ask Jeff to come up just
Sure.
for, in case you have any other technical questions, but Jackie obviously is very well up to date on this stuff. So this item is to request approval for the execution of a master trust agreement, the P3 master trust agreement, to be executed shortly after the date that approval is granted, and approval as to the form of the supplemental agreement template, the P3 supplemental agreement template, which will be used as the form of the supplemental trust agreement to be executed upon financial close of the Phase 1 South American Legion Bridge, I-270 to I-370, Phase 1 South, and each other section of the I-495 and I-270 Public-Private Partnership. Each P3 supplemental trust agreement shall be presented to the MDTA Board for approval before it's executed, with the first for Phase 1 South expected in late 2022. And with that, we'd be happy to take any questions.
I do. This is Member Von Paris. Our expenses for operating this system, we're going to be reimbursed for those expenses?
Correct, yes. We have an agreement with MDOT through these trust agreements and through these supplemental agreements that we will be reimbursed for internal and external services that we provide. And so we're fine with all that.
Yeah, and
Because
just to
Jackie-
add, so in a minute, we'll also talk about the interagency agreement between MDTA, MDOT, and MDOT SHA. That includes some of the more specific provisions to ensure that MDTA is made whole, but they are covered in some degree in these documents as well.
Thank you.
Great. Any further questions from members of the board? Great. Jacqueline, do you want to talk about the interagency agreement before we kind of move forward on the?
Okay. Jim, did you want to open that one, or you want me to just?
So this interagency agreement is, it's the agreement between MDTA and MDOT. And this is the agreement which is going to determine how we get reimbursed. It also refers to the monies that are held in accounts and the timeframes for which they may be removed from the from MDOT, as well as how the developer is paid. And Jackie, I know, Jackie and Deb are the experts on this, quite frankly, because they're the ones that negotiated pretty much all of this. And I can tell you that through negotiations between MDTA and MDOT, both Deb and I are very comfortable with this agreement from the perspective of MDTA. And I believe MDOT is also very comfortable with how we structured it for the supplemental income that MDOT may be able to take as, we'll call it profit, if you will, and utilize that throughout MDOT. So I think all parties are in agreement that this benefits both and as well as absolutely protects the MDTA. With that, I guess I'll
Yeah,
turn it over
and-
to Jackie to.
Yeah, with the board's indulgence, I may just kind of walk you through the
Sure.
documents just a little bit in more detail, just to make sure, because they are some pretty complex financing documents, and you're going to be stuck with them for a while. So just want to walk through a couple of key points. So one, I mean, just to mention, on August 11th, so in June, you guys had previously approved the Phase P3 agreement for this developer with Accelerate Maryland Partners, and that provided allowed the project to move forward to go to the BPW on August 11th. The Phase P3 agreement was signed or was approved at that time. So we do now have a fully executed Phase P3 agreement. So with that becomes kind of the importance of putting together these financing documents. So there are three documents, as Jim mentioned. The first, the Master Trust Agreement, is kind of your umbrella agreement, much like MDTA's Master Trust. It's your umbrella agreement that sets the overall framework for how the trust account will work, or all of the trust accounts will work. And then underneath that, you have supplemental trust agreements for each of the different actual section notes that are issued. So Deb, and Deb could not be here for today, which is why I'm kind of pinch hitting, so apologize you have me instead of her. But back in June, she walked you through these documents to kind of through the major terms of the Master P3 agreement, of the Master Trust Agreement. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of those key points and then talk about one change that occurred since you guys last saw these documents. So in terms of the master trust agreement, this establishes the overall framework. It establishes all of the accounts and the flow of funds for all of the funds coming through the agreement. It lays out that on the 18th of each month, the MDTA will basically put all of the P3 revenues into a program account. And then there will be a flow of funds that essentially from the top, MDTA is repaid their back office and collection costs, to Member Von Paris's question. Then the debt service on the notes will be paid, following by the rest of the money going into the operating reserve account. The operating reserve account is essentially where most of the money is going to sit. That is the actual trust account. And that is the one that MDOT is ensuring that there's going to be enough money in the operating reserve account for MDTA to be able to make the payments to the developer. So it's never an MDTA risk if there isn't sufficient money there. However, if there is a longer-term mismatch between the revenues coming in and the expenses going out, then that is where there is an MDTA obligation. Much like MDTA's trust agreement, where you have a rate covenant provision, this master trust agreement also includes a rate covenant provision that's similar in concept but very different in structure. So this one says that we're going to look ahead 24 months, and if the revenues coming in are less than the expenses going out for 6 consecutive months, then the MDTA board has to at least so first MDTA would have to look to make administrative or operational changes so that we can bring down the expenses and the revenues can come back in line with expenses. If that is not sufficient, then MDTA notifies MDOT, says, hey, MDOT, there's not going to be enough money coming into the account for all the expenses that need to go out. The secretary then at the time would have the ability to decide whether or not MDOT wants to make a commitment to continually pledge money to the operating reserve account to make that rate covenant shortfall go away. Or if not, then the MDTA board would have to at least move forward on a rate setting action. Because this rate covenant provision is different than the one you guys have on your existing accounts, you do not have any obligation to raise rates based on that. Your only obligation is to move through the rate setting process. So that's an important distinction between your current.
And then on the other side of that, on the benefit side?
Right, so the benefit side is that the Master P3 agreement ensures that the MDTA funds are held completely separate from all P3 toll revenues. By creating the second trust, we create a structural wall between the two. There are no obligations on MDTA to fund any of the amounts that are due to the developer. And again, the only requirement is for that piece about starting the rate setting action if there is a long-term mismatch between revenues and expenses. The second agreement that Jim mentioned is the supplemental trust agreement. This supplemental trust agreement would be specific to each section notes that would be issued. The section notes are kind of much like your bonds that you issue today, only these would be issued for specific project costs. These supplemental trust agreements separate the money for each section into different accounts, kind of like today with your supplemental trust agreements. So that's the basics of the trust agreements. And again, there's not many changes from what you heard before from Deb from in June from Deb. The only real change is to that rate covenant provision, and what we've done is actually made it more beneficial to MDTA because now it's not kind of a hairpin trigger that it was before. Before it said that any mismatch in any one month between revenues and expenses would trigger that toll rate setting process. Now it's a much longer term look to ensure that we're not, some just kind of seasonal variation or other things like that don't unnecessarily trigger that. And then to skip ahead to the interagency agreement real quick. So as Jim mentioned, this just kind of lays out the rights and responsibilities of MDTA, MDOT, and MDOT SHA. This is the one that lays out all the provisions of MDOT or MDTA getting repaid for all of their expenses related to the toll collection. The responsibilities of MDTA include that they, in terms of that operating reserve count and any of the accounts held in the trust that are actually MDOT funds, MDTA will only act at the direction of MDOT. And also, it lays out the responsibilities of MDOT and MDOT SHA in terms of the kind of the procurement and the construction management and the program management of the project outside of the tolls, as well as ensuring that we set up policies to kind of get down into a deeper level. So kind of think of your trust agreement as your 30,000-foot level. Your interagency agreement is like 10,000 foot. You're trying to dive into a little more details then. And then we'll have policies that establish some of the more day-to-day operations of how some of these calculations will actually work. And like the investments, Alan talked about investments earlier. There will be a similar investment policy structured for this. So those policies will come to you at a later date, and those will get further into the details. It's really kind of winnowing down as we figure out the details on this project as we move forward. So sorry for the greater detail. I just wanted to make sure you had a full picture of the pieces that we're putting before you. So again, as Jim mentioned, we are asking for approval of the master trust agreement, which is, in complete form for you here. We're asking for approval of the form of the supplemental agreement. However, the actual supplemental trust agreement would come back before you, before it is final. That would be sometime late next year. And then approval of the amended interagency agreement, which amends the previous one approved back in 2019.
And so the new one, the changes just provide more protections for MDTA.
Correct.
They do.
I, for one, always appreciate the extra detailed breakdown myself. So, thank you, Jacqueline. But any questions from members of the board?
This member Rose, I have a couple questions. One, are all ancillary expenses associated with the trust agreement, such as audit fees and other fees such as that, is that part of the expenses that we're going to be reimbursed for this process?
So yes, essentially any fee or cost that MDTA has that is specific to this program would be reimbursed. You mentioned specifically audit fees. If there is an internal audit that MDTA is doing of its entire toll revenue or toll collection program, then it may include the tolls for this project, but we wouldn't necessarily pay you for that because you're doing that work already. However, it covers there is also a protection for MDTA in there that if either the developer or MDOT is not willing to pay the cost of something we're asking for, then MDTA has no obligation to provide that service. So, it ensures that MDTA is strictly at an at-cost basis.
Okay. Thank you. And then my other question, I guess, I assume this is the right section to ask it. I saw that the notice that we issue, while all costs associated with it are not borne by us, it will go against our $3 billion debt capacity. And so I just wanted to, confirm, probably more of a question for the financial folks, that based on our projections and so forth, that we're comfortable with this. They're going to put us in a position where we can't fund some other project that's not P3 based on us issuing this debt.
I'm happy to answer or happy to let Chris jump in, but so the assumptions on this up to $100 million of section notes have already been worked into MDTA's financial forecast, so it is already assumed and is not posing any restrictions on MDTA's ability to move forward on its own projects.
Okay.
Great.
I need someone to know. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions from members of the board? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Great, thank you. Motion carries. Jacqueline, thanks for coming up today. I know, just for everybody's information, Deb was going to call in, but she's on vacation this week, and I insisted that we find someone else to do it.
Yeah.
after the last conference call she did from Disneyland in the lobby of the hotel, and we don't need to be doing that, so it's great. I just want to thank Jacqueline for jumping in to help us out. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Carl for give us really kind of a snapshot of what we've seen and heard to date on our toll rate setting process.
Thank you, everyone. So as a reminder, my name is Carl Chamberlain. I'm a project manager, Division of Planning and Program Development. Here today to review the public comment summary report for Phase 1 South, American Legion Bridge, I-270 to I-370 toll rate range setting process. I just want to hit on a couple of things before I get started going through the report, just to preview what we're going to be talking about today. So first, the summary report has been provided to you during mail-out and has also been posted to the MDTA website, or will be posted to the MDTA website today per Maryland law. There's quite a bit of information here. So I do have the report in front of me. I've got some notes, so just bear with me. I'm going to be referring to that stuff as I go along. And if I'm referring to a particular part of the report, I'll certainly alert you to the location page and stuff like that we're going through, so you guys can follow along. Before I start, I did want to provide one quick bit of context. So part of the Maryland regulations state that we need to present this summary report to you and post to the MDTA website within 10 business days after the close of the comment period. And today is that 10th day. So we closed the comment period 2 weeks ago and are here to present that report to you today. In this case, we did receive a fair number of comments during that last sort of 2-week part of the comment period. We did get a pretty good flurry. And I only say that to note that with sort of a short mandated turnaround on this comment report, it is likely the case that their MDTA staff is still sort of processing some of those last round of comments that came in. Obviously they're in here, but how those may or may not impact the final proposal that we're going to bring to you next month is still something that we're going to be considering. Of course, we'll do our best to answer any questions you have today at this meeting, but sort of rest assured that by next month, when we bring that final proposal to you, we'll be in a greater position to answer any questions about how the comments may or may not have affected that final proposal. So just sort of, again, keep that in mind as we go through that today. One last note, the public comment process is designed to solicit comments on the specific proposal that we put on the table, but we certainly don't discourage the public from commenting on anything that they want to comment on. And so for transparency, you'll notice in the report we try to focus in on those elements that are specific to this proposal, but we do provide you with summaries of all those comments that we received, just so you guys have that information. And again, I'll be more specific about that when we go through those parts of the report. So with that being said, I'm going to go dig right in unless there's any questions before we go start.
One thing I want to make clear.
Yeah, go right ahead, Jim.
Carl, is that when Carl says that he's got 10 days to pull all this information, he really didn't have 10 days because he's got mail out, right? So it reduced that time frame. So that's why he said that we may still be doing some cleanup before next month, was because they just want to make sure, double check that everything's accurate moving forward. So that's I just want to make sure that was clear in everybody's mind why that was occurring.
Thank you, Jim. And I'll just give a quick shout out to my team for working so hard and getting that all pulled together. So a little shout out to everybody. So with that, again, I'm going to go through the report, and I've got a copy in front of me, straight through it. But again, I'll make sure you're aware of what I'm going through. It starts with an executive summary. This is a highlight to the report. Since we're going to be digging into details, I'm not going to spend any time going through that executive summary. So we're going to skip ahead past the table of contents onto the first page, which is the public comment process. A couple reminders here. So we opened the comment period on May 20th after your approval at that board meeting and left it open until August 12th, as I mentioned, which is 2 weeks ago. During that time, we held 2 in-person hearings. We also held 2 call-in hearings, which many of you attended. And again, I want to thank everybody for participating and attending those sessions with us. The 4 elements, specific elements of the proposal that were on the table that we were soliciting feedback and comments on, I'll go through real quickly just as a reminder. Minimum and maximum toll rate ranges, the soft rate caps within those toll rate ranges, the process for escalating the toll rate ranges and soft rate caps in the future, the toll discounts for certain types of vehicles, and those were the 4 elements, again, that we're specifically soliciting feedback on. You'll see from the following two figures, so there's a figure on page 2 and a figure on page 3, of the 290 respondents, 62% were from comment forms, 28% were from some type of testimony, 8% were email comments, and 2% were from voicemails. I also want to draw your attention to the table at the bottom of page 3. So you'll notice in that table that we break down the comments in two ways. So there's respondents, and then there's individual comments. So it might be the case that an individual submits a comment form, and since there were 4 elements of this proposal, they might submit 1 comment for each one of those elements. In that case, we consider those 4 separate comments. Same thing with testimony. If somebody had multiple comments within that testimony, we went through that testimony and pulled out the individual comments. So you'll see we had 290 individual respondents, and that broke down into 666 individual comments. A little bit of quick nuts and bolts on how we did this. So we utilized a third-party comment collection system, which was called the Public Input Community Engagement Software. This allowed us to streamline post-processing of comments because everything that we did was connected directly to that database. So any comment form, email, even that public testimony that came in linked directly into that comment database as soon as it was submitted, so we didn't have to worry about missing any comments that came in. It was very helpful for us. The only post-processing that we did of these comments is we went through and categorized them. So if it was the case that within the testimony somebody was talking specifically about the toll rate ranges or the soft rate cap, again, we tagged that as being specific to that proposal area. Or if they provided a comment that was, again, something outside of the actual proposal, we sort of categorize those as others, again, just so we could still present that information. So that was really the only post-processing we did, in addition to just checking for duplicates, essentially. And so it might have been the case that you had a comment form, somebody just copied the same comment in each one of those 4 boxes that we provided. Again, we just tagged those as duplicates, and within the comment summary data, we considered that 1 comment. So again, those really the only post-processing we did. We wanted to be transparent and straightforward with how we collected and presented this data to you guys. And then as part of this data collection process, we also asked a number of sort of context-related questions just to help us understand about some of the people that were providing these comments. That was part of the comment form, and that's what's going to be part of the next part of the report that I'm going to go through. I'll just stop for just a quick second. Any comments or questions before I move on?
Yeah, just kind of one from me. It seems like, I think one of the challenge here is, trying to make sure that we're able to get comment on the toll rate structure itself. I think that's kind of the challenge because, there are a lot of kind of very passionate people on both sides of this project, and we just want to make sure that we don't lose the opportunity to get real substantial comment on the toll rate structure itself. But there are 2 other opportunities, right, Carl?
That's correct. Yeah, this was the first comment period that was open for this project. Where when we come to you next month with the final proposal, we'll open up a second comment period after that to collect additional comments on what we are considering the final proposal. And then, of course, the final board meeting when you're going to vote on the proposal, that will also be an open session where people can comment again directly to you during that session as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that may be a discussion point for us kind of in the future is how do we really try and convey that to the citizens to make sure that we're not losing the opportunity to get real comment on the structure so we can hear sort of feedback on that. There's just so many elements. Sometimes I think people get confused that there's so many different kind of processes going at the same time. But at this point, any questions for Carl?
Excellent. So I'll run through this next piece pretty quickly. Again, it's just a summary of some information, additional data points about the people that commented. So it starts on page 4, but I'm going to skip over to page 5. You can see from the map that majority of the comments, as expected, were from people in and around Montgomery County, which again, is something that we expected. On the next page, page 6, you can see that the majority of respondents travel within the project limits 3 times a week or more. And from figure 6, the majority of respondents utilize EasyPass. And I'll just give a quick shout out to EasyPass. If you don't have EasyPass, get it.
Right.
And again, this data is helpful. We want to make sure that we're hearing from the customers that are going to be utilizing the system in the future. So it's just good information for us to know that the people that are commenting are the people that are going to be using the system. And with that, I'm going to get into the real meat of the summary here. So this is the biggest section of the report. And the way I'm going to do this is is first I'm going to go through how we organize this section of the report, because I think it is important to let you know how we organized it. And then I've got a couple things just sort of highlighted in here. Again, I'm not going to read through everything in here, but I want to hit on some important points, so I'm going to go through this and hit those as I go. So before I start, let's talk about the organization. One of the things that we did is obviously we broke it down into the 4 individual elements of the proposal, again, to focus on the comments that we received for each one of those elements. But then within that, you'll see that there's 2 sections. So there's the comment form results, but there's also all comment results. The reason we broke this out is because within the comment form, we allowed people to check a box whether they support, oppose, or were neutral about the proposal, in addition to writing their comments. That being said, if you provided public testimony, or you submitted an email, or you submitted a letter to us, it was sort of subjective of us to try to break that down into whether each one of your comments was supportive, neutral, or in opposition to those individual things. So, for the support, neutral, and opposed, we only had the data from the comment form results. However, I do still think that's important data. I want to make sure I presented that information to you. But again, we also had all these other written comments, and we broke those out just so you guys are aware that that's the difference between, you know, the results in those 2 sections. And with that, I'm just going to run through these real quick. We're going to start on page 8 with the minimum and maximum toll rate ranges. So in that first section, the comment form results, we had 25% were supportive of the minimum and maximum toll rate ranges, 8% were neutral, 67% were in opposition to those ranges. And then moving on to the next section, you'll see that of the 666 total comments that we received, 94 provided a comment on this part of the proposal. The most common themes that we received were just general opposition to tolls overall, you know, one of the notes that Greg was making earlier, and then of course that the proposed rates were too high. So those were the 2 most common themes that we received. And in addition, we also tried to provide some context and a couple of comments for ways that people were supportive of the project as well. So you see that within the section towards the bottom of the page. To move on to the soft rate caps within the minimum and maximum toll rate ranges, just to hit the data in the comment forms again, 24% were supportive, 14% were neutral, and 62% were in opposition of the soft rate caps. Within all the comments, so again, of the 666 total comments that we received on the project, 48 comments provided a comment on the soft rate caps. Most common theme here were, again, general opposition to tolls. You'll see this a number of times as we go through here. The second most common theme was that the soft rate cap was too high, and the third most common theme was that the mechanism was complicated. And this is something that we recognized going into this. As you'll remember, we had a video again to try to help explain this. You know, I do think that was helpful, but even with that, of course, you know, certainly it is a complicated thing to understand. Again, a couple of sample comments for both opposition and support there on page 9 for you to go through. Next section, page 10, annual escalation adjustments. So to go through the comment form results, 15% were supportive, 13% were neutral, and 72% were in opposition within the comment form. And then to get into all of the comments that we received, again, of the 666 total comments, 50 comments were provided, you know, related to the annual escalation. The most common themes that we received, again, general opposition to tolls overall. The next most common theme was that escalation should not necessarily be automatic. In this case, that's how we have it set up. It's a yearly adjustment. And then the other most common theme was that escalation should be limited to the rate of inflation. So you'll remember that within our escalation calculation, we have a couple of different factors that we're using within that escalation rate. Inflation is one of those factors. Moving on to toll discounts. Data was a little bit different here, so I want to make sure we hit on this. Within the comment form, in this case, 51% were supportive of the toll discounts that we're planning on providing. 10% were neutral, and 39% were opposition. Of the 666 total comments received, 79 were, again, related to the toll discounts. The most common theme overall was overall support for these proposed discounts. However, there was some concern with the vehicle types were included in the HOV classification. Some people thought it should be HOV something other than 3, basically.
Carl?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just 1 second. So just for the benefit of the members as well as Chairman Slater, could we just let them know about the toll discount controversy with FHWA as far as HOV?
Sure, yeah, I can mention it.
So this language might change slightly.
Okay.
Well, so I don't think that this language is actually going to change, but I'll just run through it real quick, my understanding of it. So at the same time we're doing this, the P3 office is also going through the NEPA process. And one of the comments that they got in the most recent NEPA document is within that document, they call the HOV 3 Plus a discount, which is again how we refer to it here at MDTA. Anybody that travels for free or at a discount, we call it a discount. That being said, the nature of an HOT lane is technically there's an expectation that there's going to be some cars that are free. That's not technically a discount.
That's
It's
not a
just
discount.
again, it's
Right.
it's an HOT lane.
Terminology.
Exactly. It's more of a terminology thing. And so so we're just going to work with the NEPA team to make sure that, you know, within their NEPA document, the way that they describe that HOV and quote unquote the discount that we call it is as accurate as possible. Again, I think it's more of a terminology. I don't think we necessarily have to change
No, I
anything.
agree. It's a terminology thing, but I just want to make Greg aware of it. That,
Yeah, that's a great point.
That it may, you know, it may be reflected differently than we have previously reflected
Yeah.
it.
From a-
It's a technicality is all it is, but it's not going to change anything about how we do it. It's just a technicality in the wording for the NEPA document.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, state highway, kind of on the NEPA side, it's basically any carpool 3 or more is free.
Mhm.
On the tolling world, that's seen as a discount because of
Right.
that kind of transaction.
Right.
So we get that. So the discount is free.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and of course we'll coordinate that with our legal department as well.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah.
a good deal.
Yeah.
No offense, lawyers.
Yeah.
One here, Jim.
Yeah, she's a darn good one.
You got it. Don't upset her now.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Any questions? That covers the results that we received that was specific to the 4 proposals that are on the table. So before I move on, I just wanted to check if there's any questions on that. Okay. So the next section that we have is other public comments. And so this gets to that idea of being transparent and making sure we present to you all of the information that we received, whether or not it was specific to the proposal on the table. So I'm just going to run through a couple of these additional themes that we received. Actually, and I think before I get to that, I think one important sort of piece of data here is that of the 666 total comments, you'll see that 395, so over half of them were sort of categorized as these other comments.
Okay.
And again, you know, that's important because, again, we want to make sure we're not ignoring the fact that, you know, over half the people were saying these things, you know, to you. Again, that's part of the transparency of this report.
Well, I mean, I think just to that point, Carl,
Yeah.
I mean, I will tell you that every piece of feedback that we get, no matter what part of the process we're in, is important.
Mhm.
And there's no reason why we can't take feedback that we get as part of this toll rate setting process that may not apply to the toll rates and apply that in other parts of our project.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that the board members may or may not be aware of. I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but we do have an internal toll working group that consists of SHA staff, MDOT staff, MDTA staff. We meet every week to talk about what's going on. So, and really one of the benefits of that is anything that we hear that comes in that's not specific to the tolls, but maybe specific to the NEPA side of things or the project overall, we can pass that information on to that team. So again, it's a way that we are all sort of working together internally here at MDOT and MDTA to make sure that everybody understands the different things that we're hearing on the project.
However, although we do have to disclose it for full transparency, because it's an open hearing, they can say whatever they want, right? So we have to disclose it, and we do. When it comes time for the board to make the decision, you're really making the decision on the toll rate setting process, not the P3 process.
Right.
So it's almost like, you know, if you're in a court of law and the one defense attorney says, I object, and the judge says, yeah, forget all that stuff, you know. You don't forget it, but at the same time, your decision's based on the toll rate process, not the P3 comments, in other words.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate that.
The people we serve have the podium, they can use it.
That's correct, that's correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'll use this opportunity to just run through a couple of those themes with you guys. Again, I'll stay with the themes. You know, you have the time to read through some of these individual comments if you would like to. So the most common theme, you've heard this before, was opposition to toll roads in general, and that they were economically unfair. The next most common theme that we received was respondents disagreeing with involvement of a private company in this type of procurement or in managing these toll lanes. The next most common theme that we received was that tolls are not a good tool for fixing congestion. Again, another thing that we heard quite a bit of, and that the state should consider other alternatives. And I think that was the three most common additional themes of information that we heard. Again, not necessarily specific to the total proposal, but helpful for you guys in your deliberation.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. I know, and it's probably my old planner habit, I read every one of those comments.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I read every single one.
Yeah. And before you continue, just another note, our plan is to also, when we post this report on the website, also just to post all the comments. So we have a data dump of all of the comments in a pretty large spreadsheet, and so our plan is to we essentially expect that somebody's going to ask to see those, and since we have them as a digital file, our plan is just, again, for transparency, just post those at the same time as the report. So all the comments will be available to anybody that does want to see them. The difference between what we've done in the past is, like, say, back in 2011 or 2012 when we did toll hearings, we were getting most of those comment forms on paper. So in that case, we kept those forms, but if somebody wanted to come see them, they kind of had to come down to MDTA to sort of look through those. Again, now that we have essentially digital copies of all this stuff, it's easy enough for us to just post that information. So
Absolutely. I would also suggest that maybe we link that to the P3 website as well, so that people can go to one spot and see all of that information.
Sure. Yeah. And well, we can talk to them. I know that we do some cross-linking between those things. So it's a great point, Greg.
Same thing on the NEPA front. People can give their comments on the NEPA front, so the ability to see that was in.
Absolutely. And so to get into the next section of the report, so this one is titled Recommendations from the Public. So one of the things that we did when we were reading through these comments is we noticed that there were a certain handful of comments that provided either a specific recommendation or some type of specific feedback, something that was sort of less general. And again, we wanted to break those out. It was a smaller number of comments. We wanted to break those out because, again, we felt it would be helpful in your deliberation as you guys move forward on this proposal. I'm just going to give a couple of examples so you can kind of see how this section works. Again, I'm not going to read through every one of these specific comments that we got, but as an example, so under this first section on the minimum and maximum tolls, within this first comment that we received, you'll see towards the end they say, it appears that the minimum proposed toll should be sufficient to cover the cost of the project. So this is a specific thing where they're trying to let us know that they think that this is a little bit too high and maybe the minimum should be considered
as the rate itself.
Yeah, as the rate itself. Again, something more specific. Anytime somebody provided either something specific, whether it was on the rate that we were using or anything like that, again, we thought that was useful to pull out and bring your attention to. Another example of a couple of these, so moving on to page 15, under escalation, so one of the comments was, escalation should be tied to inflation. Again, as we mentioned, escalation has a couple different factors in it. They're suggesting that we should only be using inflation again. Fair suggestion. And then just a couple more. For instance, under discount, somebody had mentioned the commuter rate needs to be considered. So we have a commuter rate in all of our other facilities. In this case, that's not the case. So again, fair suggestion. Under sort of tolls in general, moving over to page 16, somebody suggested motorcycles and trucks should not be eligible to use these lanes. Again, just want to make sure.
Motorcycles and trucks.
That was their suggestion. So again, anytime where there was something a little bit more specific, it was a smaller handful of comments, but
Sure.
but again, since they really jumped out to me when I was, again, reading through every comment that came in, and so we wanted to make sure we pull those out and have those available to you guys. As I mentioned, under records management, we are planning on just posting all the comments. So everything will be available at our website, and if anybody has any questions, they can use the email address or go directly to our website to find that information. And then lastly, I'll just hit on a couple of these appendices. So the first appendix, when we did those public hearings, we created our own individual summaries for those in-person and call-in hearings. And so since we had those as separate documents, we just attached them so you can kind of see specifically some of that information that was said at those hearings. Appendix B, just a list of the elected officials that testified at those hearings. Appendix C, the public comment form, so you can reference what that public comment form looked like that we were using. Appendix D, this is all the comments by zip code, so that map that we put together, this is just a spreadsheet of those results. Appendix E, public notices. This is everywhere that we placed legal ads, to notify people that this process was beginning back in May, and then you'll see a copy of the 2 legal ads that we ended up posting for those. And then lastly, Appendix F. This is a corollary of that last section of the report, the recommendations from the public. So while we were going through this, there were these comments, again, for other aspects of the project, not just the 4 individual proposals on the table. And that's all this appendix represents. Again, just wanted to make sure we pulled out those comments that we felt were specific recommendations or feedback that, again, we thought were helpful for MDOT as a whole or for the big board. So you'll see, I'm not going to go through these, but like you see there's a handful that was related to the P3 as overall. And things like that. So again, I'm not going to go through the whole proposal, but I just want to make sure you're aware of the reason that proposal or that appendix was in there and some of the information that was presented. With that concludes my summary, and happy to answer any questions. We also have Jeff Holden here from the P3 office, and I may or may not defer to him on anything that questions you might have, but certainly feel free, and we'll do our best.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions from members of the board?
Good question. I mean, we compiled all of the comments. Are we gonna act on any of them, or who does that? Who decides that?
It's a good question. Jim, do you want to mention?
Okay.
I was to say, yeah, the whole point of this process is we collect this feedback from the public. We make sure that you understand everything that we heard from the public, and then we use that information to determine what that final proposal is going to be. So we put that initial one on the table, and then we have the option.
Seems like we
here
should
to-
do at least give them something.
And
I don't know.
we are looking at
Yeah.
these comments very seriously. I
Yep.
can tell you, it is an internal working group
Right.
that will, MDTA staff, as it's called, that will
Mm.
present it to you. But we are looking at a few of these, and you may be seeing some slight changes.
Yeah.
It's an important part of the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we don't solicit public input just to discard it.
Mhm.
Right.
We do it because
A lot of effort.
the public
Right.
has,
Yeah.
some good ideas also, and we may have missed something, and so we act on that.
Yeah, and that also gets to one of the notes that I mentioned before I started, which was, at next month's meeting, which is when we plan to bring the final proposal to you. At that point, we'll be prepared to answer, why the proposal either stayed the same or why we made any changes and how this feedback impacted that. So we'll be in a position to answer, that type of information for you, when we present that final proposal. It's a great question.
This is Member Ardinger, and I think this is a similar question. But so when you're posting, you're just posting for the public. You're just posting a summary of the comments and then maybe some examples of those comments. Sounds like eventually there will be some type of follow-up. For example, if there's certain things, if there's a misunderstanding as to how it works, will there be clarification? I know that that's already been given to the public, but will we follow up with something like that?
So I'll do one clarification first. So this report, which is a summary with themes and example comments, absolutely posted. But but for transparency, we are going to post a file that is essentially a data dump of every comment that we receive. So every comment will be available as well as this report. To get to your point of how we plan on communicating information back and forth. So one of the things that we did during this comment process is, as we were receiving comments, anything that came in that was a question or somebody didn't seem to understand something, one of the things that we did is we do have a frequently asked questions section of our website. We would go through, analyze that information, and see, is there something that we could better explain within that frequently asked questions, or is there a frequently asked question that we didn't have available to us? So we try to do our best within within that process to, again, add additional information to the website that we could, or again, clarify any information that, again, seemed to be a common misunderstanding as we go through. So that's kind of how we handle that.
Thank you.
Member Van Paris?
Just a quick question. I know we've done a good job in reaching out to the community. I saw, the lists of newspapers and other type media. But my question is, there's a lot of commercial vehicles traveling.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel we did on reaching out to the commercial, business community with this? Is that, I guess, it's just a question because they pay a lot of, they contribute a lot to our tolls. And it's a
really good question.
Yeah, and so in addition to the media outreach that we do, we also do reach out to elected officials as well, is another way that we reach out. And we keep a stakeholder list, which includes industry groups and everything like that. So we did have a pretty comprehensive list of stakeholders, individuals, groups, and things like that. We worked with the P3 office. Obviously, they had a really good database and repository of stakeholders that they'd already been working with for a long time. So they were able to hand that over to us, and we could utilize that in our email blasts and stuff like that. So I would say I think we did a really good job. The one thing I will note is, and I mentioned this internally, I would say like halfway through the process, I was getting a little bit nervous about the number of comments that we were sort of receiving on the project, and because I felt like we were doing a good amount of outreach. And then again, as I already mentioned, and this tends to happen sometimes. You get towards the end of the process and you realize it's going to be ending, and that's sort of get that flurry. So overall, after seeing the final numbers, I was confident. You don't want to get too few because, again, we do all this outreach and we do all this work, and it's really important to us that we get that feedback from the public. Again, that's why we do this. And
Thanks.
Member Paris, one of our stakeholders is the Maryland Motor Truck Association.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we reach out to them specifically.
We work very closely with Louis Campion, who is president or chairman,
Yeah.
whatever his title is, of the Maryland Truckers Association. And we also work with the port, because obviously they see a lot of truckers independent. And so we try to work through both of those organizations. But Louis Campion's usually our go-to person for anything in the trucking industry. That's
a good guy.
That's the organization for Maryland.
One of the challenging parts in this part of the state that we're talking about is the fact that a lot of that commercial traffic is through traffic.
Yeah.
And so it's, so you're trying to capture them as they're coming through. They could be coming up and down the eastern seaboard, or they could be going kind of out west, or, so it's really trying to capture that.
Thank you.
Remember?
How do you qualify an appropriate sample set? Because it would seem to me, so I would think through, Montgomery County has 1 million residents. That doesn't mean you have 1 million drivers. But what would you say an appropriate sample set would be that reflects the sentiment in the community or the stakeholder population that would be impacted by the project?
It's a great question. I would say our job is to get the word out there the best we can in the widest sort of range we can. Sorry, I keep having my mask keeps kind of falling down here. And so to a certain degree, what we do is we make it available to everybody, and we solicit those comments. And we try to leave the comment period open. I think we had a pretty long, almost 3-month comment period on this one. Again, do our best to get the word out there, solicit the comments that we're going to try to get from people, and sort of go from there. I guess there's only so much we can do to sort of coax people into providing feedback. The only other thing I would say is this project has multiple elements. So this is the toll rate setting process. There's a NEPA process. There was the procurement process. So there were multiple ways for people to engage and comment on this process. For instance, on the NEPA, I think they had maybe like 3,000 comments, something like that. So it might have been the case that some people felt like their voice was heard during that process, and so they didn't engage in this process. So there might have been a lot of different factors, a lot of different reasons for why maybe people chose to comment on this process versus another process.
But I would say we don't technically look at its sample size. Because as you've seen in the hearings, you do tend to hear from the people who oppose more than you hear from the people who support. When various surveys have been done on support versus non-support, the support for the project has been over 70%, but you're not seeing 70% of the good comments coming through. So that's just the nature of the beast, if you will, especially with state government and hearing process. So all we can do is, like Carl says, is reflect what we hear. That's it. And we don't make a determination on whether that means it's a certain percentage that support or oppose. It's just that we gather the information, one, for us to assess, to see if we want to make any changes, and two, to report it out. And quite frankly, the reporters are going to pick it up, and others. And there's been no lack, trust me, no lack of information from the reporters, both TV and written, about this project. So, I mean, you have to live under a rock not to know this is going on.
You know, remember, Carol, one of the other things that we try to do in the beginning of a process like this, more of on the planning process and probably the toll rate setting process, is look at the communities that are going to be impacted, the communities that are going to use the facility, and truly try and break down what's the best way to reach those communities. And so you can very much see kind of where those comments are coming from, and if there are communities that maybe we aren't reaching, that maybe we need to use different outreach elements to do. You know, sometimes I've been in projects where, you know, you have tough to reach communities. Maybe you go in through the churches, or maybe you go in through, there's a community fair or something like that. You set up a table, those types of things. And just some communities sometimes you just have to meet them where they are and go out there and try and find them, because you don't want to go forward with a project or a program until you've really made sure you've heard from the various communities and get that full picture of what we're doing.
And Greg gets a report, what do we get that, like twice a week? On all the outreach efforts that we do, and I mean, it's in the thousands. And it's exactly what Chairman Slater said. They go out with a bus, they go out to the community fairs, you know, they set up a tent and talk to people. I mean, they go talk to specific community groups or associations, and they're out there communicating constantly. And I'm telling you, there's been thousands of meetings.
In multiple languages as well.
Yes, about this project.
So I guess I could extrapolate from that. I think for me, it's important to have this level of clarity that MDTA is comfortable with its modality with regard to how it's reached out. Regardless of what the response rate is, we can stand confidently in the space of having attempted to the broadest possible audience of people communicate what was going on in a very clear way.
That's right. I'll let Carl answer that one.
And look at the media outreach that's in this report, where we advertise and all about all of our hearings and everything else. It's actually a federal requirement.
Yeah.
And we comply with all the federal requirements as far as outreach, Title VI, all those federal regulations.
I'd probably throw out there that we could probably do half of what we're doing and still meet the federal requirements. We're doing
I
much,
agree.
We're doing much broader
more.
than,
That's
we're doing
correct.
much more than what.
Great point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Any other questions from members of the board?
Great.
Thanks for the update, Carl.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
You did a good job. Really good job on this.
Great. And now I'll turn it over to Will for a 3G update.
Well, good morning, Chairman, members. My name is Will Pines, and for the record, I'm Chief Operating Officer for the MDTA. And this is our regular monthly 3G program update. Jumping right into the second slide of your briefing package, you'll note that we are continuing to work on our backlog processing. We've really fully commenced the mailing of notices of toll due, and as I mentioned last month, we had already been doing significant mailings of this prior citations that had moved over from our NG system. So we're working on a metering plan for those NOTDs, the notices of toll due that go out, and also on bringing current the ICC ETC transactions or Easy Pass tolls on the ICC according to the backlog plan, which essentially is a 2-to-1 plan moving the transactions from our lane side vendor CAPCH over to our TransCore side back office vendor. That 2-to-1, what that means again is 1 week of current transactions will post concurrently with 1 week of backlog transactions, and that allows us to catch up on the backlog and have it cleared within the fiscal year 22 period so that we'll recover all of that backlog revenue within this fiscal year. We do expect that to be completed in the summer of 22, and any delays that may occur in backlog processing will be delayed day for day so that we're not going to try to play catch up on backlog processing in a way that would hurt our customers. It's better to just accept if there's a transaction blip when they're working between the vendors, that we allow that to slip day for day. But we have enough time built in here that we fully expect to still complete everything with some contingency within FY22. Since we met all of our financial covenants in FY21 and the backlog is planned to be processed within this fiscal year, we're only at the board planning to provide updates on the 3G program from a backlog and operational standpoint. The financial presentations going forward will just be part of our normal financial forecast updates that we provide on a quarterly basis. Some of the backlog has had minor delays here and there that have been associated with IAG processing. You know, there's 39 different IAG members, and we have to try to tailor how we're processing to every one of their individual preferences and rules. So every once in a while that does result in some challenges that come up, but we've been working through that actively. And as we do process the backlog, we have seen a significant spike in the call center volumes associated with customers trying to resolve or complain about the backlog of their tolls. And I appreciate Chairman Slater's earlier comment about our earlier than planned AT transition, that has resulted in a lag in customers moving over to pay by plate and Easy Pass options. And so that volume of video is still quite high. We're operating around 80% Easy Pass penetration, but long term we fully expect that as customers realize how this NOTD process will work with it fully resuming, many of them will opt to switch over to more convenient payment options with either pay by plate or Easy Pass. So that will help us with our call center volumes, but obviously we're in the trenches now because we do have such a significant backlog of NOTDs.
Well, can I pause you for 1 second?
Sure.
Just maybe for the benefit of the board and anyone listening. So if someone's not an Easy Pass customer today and they've got tolls owed, they could sign up to be an Easy Pass customer, get that discount from all those back tolls as well?
That is not currently how the system is set up. When the business rules were put in place in the TransCore system, it was designed where the backlog wasn't contemplated, so it did not make sense to make Easy Pass retroactive. We've internally discussed this and agree that from a customer perspective, when they sign up for Easy Pass, it's kind of confusing of why would I keep continuing to get video tolls. So the TransCore, our back office vendor, is implementing a switch so that backlog tolls will be processed under either pay by plate or Easy Pass retroactively, so that they don't continue to get paper mail after they've made the step to switch.
To make it easier for them.
Exactly. We initially didn't think that would be needed but given the volume of the backlog, it really is a major benefit to our
We have a
customers.
significant discount for Easy Pass.
Right.
Significant.
Sorry.
No, that's good question. And I also want to as thank Carl for his plug earlier on Easy Pass. Obviously, that's something that we need help across the board with getting people moved over to help with our managing our call center. Kind of getting into the schedule here. At Go Live, we had planned to focus on 174 tickets that were in 30, 60, and post-SAT releases. We are at 119 days since Go Live, and the contractor has released 189 tickets. Most of those, however, were priority items and not tickets that were in those original buckets. They've had numerous new issues that have been identified from our customers reaching out to us, and also from the call center operations and our customer service centers. And an example of that, like what Greg just mentioned, is that a new ticket that came up, we wanted to change the business rules for how the tolling is processed, and so that's one example of a ticket that's being worked on that wasn't originally contemplated. Most of the releases to date have focused on fixing newly identified issues that are higher priority and are really customer focused. Most of the system now is meeting the needs of our customer with one kind of big exception. We still receive a lot of calls and complaints from first-time login users and people who are having challenges with their PIN and password resets. So our communications team is working on a plan right now to put out a video to help our customers better understand how to migrate through the specific process on how to do that. And we're also going to continue to work with TransCore to identify ways between our IVR system and with making some changes within the software to make those two processes easier for our customers. They've given the fact that they are behind on the tickets that were in that 30, 60, and post-SAT those buckets initially. The contractor has submitted a schedule to MDTA to complete those items. We're currently negotiating with the contractors to complete a non-compensable time extension that would allow them to finish those tickets and to add funds specific to quantity changes related to AET and backlog quantities. Originally, the contract was laid out with quantities for cash. The video quantities increase with AET and the backlog, but the cash items go away. Those modifications will require BPW and do-it approval. We've already received the do-it approval on the authorization to negotiate that modification and to move it forward to BPW. Some of our key focus areas, we continue to close out artifacts and reports and documentation. And again, obviously the backlog is a key focus for us. We're ensuring that proper information is being transferred from our CAPS lane side vendor over to the back office on the TransCore side. And any time where we've identified any tolling errors whatsoever, we've credited our customers appropriately and both fixed the issue and issued credits. And in certain instances where customers were undercharged, we generally do not try to reapply a separate toll to increase the toll. We just live with the fact that they were undercharged, because it would be very confusing on a statement to see multiple charges for the same transaction. This also includes resolution of the reporting structure and QA/QC structures. With the ETC program, there's a lot of new features that, since this is a performance-based system, so EasyPass operations, IT, and finance have been working very collaboratively together to actually change our organizational structure a little bit so that the ETC program has better program management and contract administration going forward. That really is a lesson learned out of the delivery to date, and it's something that we're actually restructuring a little bit to bake into our processes going forward. And we did effectively complete a partnering meeting with CAPS. It was really great. We met downtown in Baltimore, talked about some of our issues and how we can work together going forward as we're moving into the operations and maintenance phase. And we have a partnering meeting planned with TransCore, the back office vendor, planned for September. Go live risk tracking. Again, the biggest risk right now, probably the biggest complaint that we have is the call center volumes. A part of that is backlog, part of it's the first time login. We track the specific issues that are causing calls and have collaborative discussions with TransCore's operations and maintenance team and their development team, so that when their operations and maintenance team and the call center is seeing specific issues, they work closely with the software developer to find ways to make fixes that will help reduce the volumes. They also, with that, are opening up an overflow center in New Jersey. That's going to bring on 30 new employees, and they have 25 employees at the call center being trained right now. When they launched, they started with 160 employees and are down to 60 right now. And they've noted very substantial challenges. We talked about it last month with, they've indicated to us that unemployment is just too enticing for them to want to stick around and deal with challenging phone calls all day. So they've really struggled with people staying on board. But they do have a revolving door to get people in, and we're working with them and going to continuing to work with our civil rights office to see if there's opportunities with MBE firms to possibly become an extension and another overflow option for them. And also, Jim and I have scheduled a meeting with MVA to see if there's an opportunity for the MVA call center to also link in here, get some integrity training,
Great.
and their call center possibly be an option. So this call center issue we take very seriously. We do not want our customers to have long wait times. We're trying to go with an all of the above strategy on figuring out how to get the wait times down. But it is very challenging, and I, the fixes in the software is one issue, but again, most of the issues that are there are really enhancing the system. There's not a whole lot of customer issues at this point, outside of like the login issue and the password issue that I talked about before. A big part of the calls and complaints is about backlog processing at this point. So separate from that, as I mentioned, we're working on the NOTD processing. Currently, just so it's clear, when the transactions are moving 2-to-1, that's from CAPS to TransCore and posting on the web for them to actually be able to pay online and receive a 15% discount if they proactively pay before, if a customer proactively pays before we mail. We currently have about 11 million transactions that are posted online where that's an opportunity for our customers. With that said, we have also, TransCore has initiated mailing 30,000 envelopes a day, which equates to about 130,000 transactions a day. So it's a very significant volume of video transactions that are being sent out to catch up on the backlog. We talked about it ad nauseum if we should go higher than that, but based on the call center performance right now, we feel like that's a bad idea to try to push them any harder because it'll just make our wait times longer. So, and also, there are customers in that 11 million transactions that are posted. There are customers that have several $100s worth of tolls at one time that are there, and by mailing out the 30,000 a day, that puts a little bit of a cap on how much we're going to bill one customer at one time. Most of the really high dollar customers tend to be businesses that have multiple vehicles traveling through our facilities often in a single day. So far, with the early payment option, we've collected $1.7 million in online payments. We are continuing to push that messaging about the early payment option because if ultimately it saves the customer money and it's going to reduce our calls if they pay on the web and they're happy. Hopefully get signed up for pay-by-plate and keep it simple going forward. We are also, though, however, because there are some really high dollar NOTD customers, we are holding customers that have more than 25 NOTDs right now so that we can send them, they're available online to pay, but we want to, prior to sending them a notice that has a hard due date, we want to send them a proactive letter that allows them essentially to set up their own internal payment plan to try to pay it down before we send them the official NOTD that would set a firm payment due date that would kick off the escalation and citation process. So that's another thing, hearing from our customers that they're frustrated with the size of some of the backlog bills. We're trying to work with them the ones that do have larger bills, to send them a notice in advance so that they can pay online, receive the discount, and not have a hard due date. We do also, MDTA, in helping the call center, we have 9 of our toll collector staff that were former cash collectors embedded in at our customer service center to help both manage cases and some of the case volume. Much of the case volume actually migrated over from the NG system, so they're helping to work with that backlog of cases. And also deal with transponder fulfillments, helping to mail out. If you sign up for EasyPass, you don't want to have to wait for your transponder to come in the mail. So with that, I've kind of checked the boxes on where we are. And again, we're really laser focused on trying to improve our performance with our customers and keep them as happy as we can through this transition. But I'm happy to take any questions that you may have on 3G.
Great. Thanks, Will. Any questions from members of the board? I know
think I'm driving them crazy because I'm asking for like weekly and bi-weekly updates on everything, so thank you for indulging me. But any questions from members of the board?
This member Von Paris, I have a quick question as it relates to the backlog and the reduction, or charging the lower rate. Are we defining as a point of clarification, are we defining the quote-unquote backlog period for that? Or are we going to do that going forward as well for a delinquent account?
Yeah, anyone who, going forward, the system is designed that if you pay online in advance of us mailing the notice of toll due, that saves us the cost of the mailing, and, we give that cost savings back to the customer through the
Okay.
lower toll rate.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the board?
Hey, Will, Member Rosen, to that question, is there a function in the system that if someone goes to the toll, they don't have the Easy Pass, that they receive a text so that will remind them to do that? Okay. Pay in advance before they receive the notice of toll?
No, unfortunately, video customers, we do not have, we have to do a DMV lookup through their license plate, and most customers do not have that kind of personal information linked to their license plate information.
However, if they sign up for pay-by-plate, then they would.
Sure. Correct. But I think that's an interesting question, though, in terms of like, we go through the MVA records, most people don't have that type of information, but the more and more people are logging their emails and things like that. But I think you just got to really be careful that you're only using the information for the purpose that they give you,
Sure.
and those types of things.
Well, I think the other challenge, and I think Will would agree, so about 30% of our people are from out of state.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do the MVA or DMV lookup, we're not getting their email information from the DMV or MVA, and they're not filing it with us because they have no account with us.
Right.
So we have no way to reach them other than to do the lookup from out of state and then send them a bill. I mean, it's just, there's no way about it. So.
So that would be for the initial time, but what I'm suggesting is if someone, they pay their toll once through or the early pay discount, and there's some way that they can select in the future, even if they may not opt to hold a card with us, but there may be a way that we can then record voluntarily their email address so that we let them know in the future.
Yeah, so what we would do in that case, Member Rosen, is we would suggest two things. One, Easy Pass, that's always the best option, especially Maryland Easy Pass for discounts. And then two, pay-by-plate. So if they sign up for pay-by-plate, then we have a way to register them into our system. Otherwise, we don't technically have a way to register them. So they do have that option, in other words.
What's interesting, Member Rosen, is that's where the industry is kind of headed. Paying your tolls either through embedded into your vehicle's operating system and kind of logging it through there, or through your telephone. So, 10 years from now, we could very easily not have those Easy Pass transponders. We could be all making those transactions through your cell phone or directly into your car.
Your suggestion, Member Rosen, I will certainly take back to our vendor to see if when someone pays a video transaction, if there's an opportunity in the future to record either an email or text on file to notify them. Some customers may want that option, so I'll ask. We have a lot of PCI requirements with credit cards and all that, so it's a little bit challenging on what we can do with customer information, but I'll check in on it.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the
Thank
board?
you.
Great. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
At this point, I'll turn it over to Member Gaines for an update on our Human Resources Committee.
Okay, we, Human Resource Committee met August 12th, 2 weeks ago, and we were provided with an update on the actions taken by MDTA to prepare for return to normal operations and reintegrate employees into the workplace. I think this was in response to the governor's order that he wanted the agencies to be 25% back in office by June 14th, and then 50% June 21st, 75% June 28th, and then 100% July 5th. Of course, every agency's got different workforce, and it's, I guess we have to adapt to them. I mean, for beginners, we were never at 0%. What do we have, like 35, 40% in the field? Your policemen, your construction workers, your mechanics, they can't work from home. So we started at a higher level, and then and I guess we kept building on that, and then we have now we get to the end. There are hardship exemptions, I guess, for family issues, and there's a return to work committee that helps monitor that, and I mean, we all know teleworking is becoming more popular. I'm not sure how it's gonna lay out here, but in the end, I think I think we're mostly. How many people are out on teleworking now, would you say?
Tanya.
Is it 5% small?
Department-wide, we think we're going to be at around 25%.
25%,
kind of
wow.
on an almost permanent basis.
Yeah,
Well,
really.
that's some form of
Yeah.
work, not full-time, but it could be 2 days a week.
1 day,
3
week, 2
days a
day,
week,
okay, yeah. So we're in that range, you think?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, some functions are a little bit harder than others.
Right. I
It,
agree.
the harder conversation I've been having with some folks is if you're going to telework 3 days a week, I'm not necessarily feeling good about you having that kind of plush, empty corner office, and
Right.
so you need to try and create an environment where people have these shared workspaces, and we can reduce our real estate
Right.
footprint and have that savings. But I think,
That's
I personally think it's going to be a great recruiting tool for some of this next generation coming into the workforce. I've shared the article with a number of folks over the last couple of months, but New York Times did a great article on kind of remote workforce. And the consensus among kind of the Fortune 500 companies is that you really need 3 days in the office to really be part of the organizational culture. And outside of that, it's hard. If you have these kind of 100% remote workforce employees,
Yeah.
you need to work hard to make sure that they feel like they're part of that culture and that collaborative
Yeah, great
environment.
buzzword is team.
Yeah.
For the last
It's hard.
10 years, how can you be part of the team when you're at home?
You're not there.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Maybe, as Lee pointed out, Member Gaines pointed out, Tanya, there's been like a minimum of 30% that been on board, without, during the pandemic, and then obviously moving forward for higher.
So, just for the record, Tanya Dorsey, Director, Office of Human Resource and Workforce Development. In MDTA, we have a rather large police force, and we have our operations staff, so we don't have quite as high a number of teleworkers as some of the other transportation business units. But we did safely reintegrate our workforce back into the workforce. But again, our ops people and our police staff have been working throughout the pandemic.
I think what they're looking for, they're kind of looking at about what percentage of our employees were here
During the whole time.
pretty much the whole time. It was way more than 30%.
It was higher than 50.
Yeah, I
Okay.
thought it was
Fine.
closer to 60, but, because
Good.
I think I remember seeing statistics that we had approximately 30% of our people on telework during COVID.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So now
30, 35, yeah.
Yeah, you really had to adjust. I know some of the more challenging things we did on the kind of the field side, the operations and maintenance side, go to like A days and B days, for instance, so that you don't have environments where you're forced to put 5 and 6 people in a truck at the peak of the pandemic. I can tell you that one of the more challenging things I had to do over the last year and a half, 2 years was manage a snowstorm in the height of a pandemic with the restrictions that we had.
Yeah.
One person in a truck, disinfecting. We had cots over every building that we could possibly find, where normally you have a big room where folks are getting some rest and those types of things. But just trying to manage that. The good news is there were less people out. And so, you know, there were a little more patience with getting the snow clear, but it was tough. The maintenance and operations side has been really, really tough, and I think across the board they've done a pretty good job
Yeah, I
at
didn't realize you
keeping
had
it
such
safe.
restrictions like that.
Yeah.
One person to a truck.
Yeah,
You can't get it done.
you don't think about that until you're like,
Your truck's
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
We don't work in trucks, so that's
Well,
different. That's-
And you only have so many trucks, so you know you can't.
Right, yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we also talked about the state salary and pay schedule, and we got an overview of the MDOT salary schedules, and discussed how pay increases are provided to our employees, and that's pretty wild. It was a deep dig we did there, and there are multiple salary schedules, and then each schedule has multiple grades, and each grade has multiple steps. And we learned how a person could advance either through COLAs or promotions, or in some cases, the whole area of salary grade adjustments. If we did it a while ago on IT, where we were too low, and we just upgraded the whole schedule. So all in all, I think you have a fairly flexible system for a state. I would say, you can, if you need something to get somewhere to hire somebody, it seems like, we're pretty able to do that. So then continuing with that, we heard about how we adapted to the state minimum wage increasing to $15 an hour, and that that was sort of an example of following the state salary schedules. Everything got under $15 an hour got lopped off, so that was, I guess, pretty simple. And we also had an example of the annual salary review provided to certain employees in fiscal classifications, how they all got reclassified, and so we got to see the details on that. And we heard once more about the Maryland MDTA toll collectors, and the recruitment and examinations unit has been continuing to work on that. I think beginning of 2020, we had 137 toll collectors. Now we have 56 remaining. Of course, they're not doing toll collection; they're doing other odd jobs that Jim can find for them. And I guess right now, I guess we're gonna. They have the inside track on any MDOT positions. It seems like we almost give them the first choice on those things if they're qualified.
We really do training operations and those types of things, giving somebody an opportunity that was a toll collector that wants to continue to kind of serve the department, being able to go over to MVA or State Highway and get some training and kind of compete for a position over there. We give them a lot of resources in being able to do that.
We did want to offer some kudos to MDOT MVA because they did a special recruitment just for our group.
Great.
To give them an opportunity to become customer agents. And we've been working with the other TBUs to see what opportunities are available.
Yeah. Our administrator at the MVA is the best. And so.
That was about it.
Great. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Before we move on.
Sure.
Tanya, can you confirm for me the news I think I've heard about Dwayne Smith?
One of our employees, yes, sir, I can share that. Unfortunately, he did pass away.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. Dwayne Smith, I believe, was the MBE compliance officer. And he was a member of the original cohort for the leadership initiative that was launched back in 2019. For this board's information, I am going to just say that on behalf of the board, I want to acknowledge that, because what I remember from that my last conversation with Dwayne was his passion for wanting to grow his leadership so that he could contribute to this organization. And we'd be remiss if we didn't recognize that man's passing and his contribution to the MDTA.
Yeah, thank you so much.
He was a member of the Emerging Leaders Program, I believe is what you're referencing. And Member Carroll was one of our speakers, and he did assist us with that effort. And, you know, we were happy to assist his family, and we did all that we could to make sure that we provided them with the information that they needed. But we do offer, again, our condolences to his family.
It's special when we have employees that just want to grow
Yeah.
to serve more.
So how old was he?
What's that?
How old was he?
Mid-50s?
Mid-50s?
I try not to keep those things in my head. I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head.
He was
Too young.
Too young, yeah.
Too young.
Well,
Say that.
that goes without saying,
And,
yeah.
But I think that's, you know, it's just this kind of willingness to serve. I'm just going to go off on a tangent for a second because I do feel like that's one of my great concerns, you know, with kind of this next generation, making public service and service in general kind of attractive to them. So to me, it's just kind of special to have someone like him come into the family, and it's certainly a devastating loss to lose him.
But I will say that not only was he a good employee, but everyone wrapped around to help the family, HR especially, and of course his unit. And we did get numerous compliments from his family members about all the support that MDTA as a group provided to their family. They were actually overwhelmed by the amount of support they got, which says a lot about MDTA and their employees.
I would welcome an opportunity for this board to honor him in some way as well. So we want to talk about that.
This is Member Ardinger, and Jim, I would say what you just said does not surprise me at all, because just being around you and your staff and your employees, you can just see it's a family and feeling. So my sympathies to all.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
It really is. This department is really a family. You know, I kind of laughed earlier in my career when I started in survey. We were a true family there because we'd fight all day and then go get a beer afterwards. You know, we were a real family, but yeah, it really is a family. And what I've seen in this department, when one family is impacted, and that's been one of our challenges over the years with some of the broader programs like our Maryland Charities campaign. You know, we're trying to push our Maryland Charities campaign because there's so many positive contributions to that program. But what they do is they end up competing with all these other, you find these different programs within the units. You know, I often get, you know, emails or text messages about things that we don't even know are happening. You know, I got one a few months back from someone, a family friend on the Eastern Shore who happened to be at a high school, and one of our local shops there from SHA had come together, taken a collection and bought coats for all the kids in the school and some of the kids in need. We didn't even know it was happening. It was just, you know, groups that come together and kind of help a community, and it's just, I just have always felt we need to be part of this community and to do that the right way. But thanks for raising that. Great. Well, we'll go to our final agenda item and go over to Executive Director reports for our Executive Director's report.
And Mr. Chairman, that was a great segue you just said, because talking about things that we may not know all the time that are occurring. I'd like to start with a report from our travel plaza. And as you recall, last month we shared with the board an update on Maryland-themed merchandise that's available to Chesapeake and Maryland houses. Products from local companies are now available for purchase at their Reimagined Deli and Company. And this is the one I was talking about. On Saturday, August 21st, the Maryland House Travel Plaza once again played a supporting role in America's 9/11 ride. The MDTA Operations Police and other departments worked together along with our vendors and concessionaire to host Sunoco and the America's 911 Foundation, or I should say 9/11 Foundation, for this very important event. The operations group, led by JFK Facility Administrator John Lohmeyer, did a fantastic job. The parking lots were spotless, and there were no traffic issues on the site. His team deserves a huge amount of thanks. And the riders arrived at 8:45 a.m. and stopped for food to relax and refuel their motorcycles. They rode out around 9:30 to their next stop in Delaware, and then to Ground Zero in New York City. You know, this event has been taking place for the past 18 years. It starts in Pennsylvania, travels through, Virginia, D.C., Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, and ends in New York. However, it was not held last year due to COVID-19. The event raises money for the America's Foundation Scholarship Program, benefiting children of active first responders. Each year it stops at the Maryland House, MDTA's Travel Plaza, where riders receive complimentary refreshments. The Travel Plaza concessionaire provides free bottled water, donuts, presented goodie bags with the products from the Visit Hartford, Maryland, and MDTA Easy Pass Maryland. And this year there were 400 motorcycle participants, 50 escorts, that's law enforcement, motor units from various jurisdictions, and 10 support vehicles, including fire trucks, ambulances, and vehicles towing trailers which collect any disabled motorcycles. So that, right to your point about not knowing everything that happens where communities come together, it's another great example. Now, as we enter the final months of Tier 1 NEPA Bay Bridge Crossing Study, I thought this meeting would provide a good opportunity to update board members on this status. The draft environmental impact statement, the DEIS, public hearing comment period ended 5/17/21. The MDTA received over 850 comments on the DEIS. During that comment period, all DEIS comments received were reviewed and considered. Next steps are to develop the combined Tier 1 final environmental impact statement, the FEIS, record of decision, or ROD, which is the last formal step in the Tier 1 NEPA process. The FEIS and the ROD will summarize and respond to the public and agency comments, identify the selected 2-mile wide corridor alternative, and it is anticipated to be completed in the winter of 2021/2022. If funding were to become available for a Tier 2 study, it would identify specific alignment alternatives within the 2-mile wide selected corridor alternative identified during Tier 1. The Tier 2 NEPA study could take 3 to 5 years to identify and evaluate a no-build alternative and various crossing alignments within the 2-mile wide Tier 1 selected corridor alternative. It would also evaluate how buses, ferries, transportation system management, and demand management could be used in conjunction with these crossing alignments, review potential environmental impacts, and would determine the project delivery methods such as design build, decide bid build, or to organize and finance design, construction, operations, and maintenance. All this leading to the Federal Highway Administration ultimately approving one alignment with a Tier 2 ROD. The process would need a Tier 2 study ROD before proceeding to final design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction if a build alignment alternative is selected. With that, as we continue to persevere through the COVID-19, so does our Easy Pass outreach team, who are back in action. Since restarting outreach in August of 2021, the Easy Pass outreach team has worked or committed to more than 25 local area events, including tabling at both MACO and MML. So MACO is the Maryland Association of Counties. MML is the Maryland Municipal League. Both conferences are heavily attended by elected officials throughout the state. And of course the Maryland State Fair, as well as the Ironbirds, Shorebirds, Orioles, and Ravens games. In fact, Easy Pass will be marketing at every home game for the Ravens this season on the Ravens Walk, providing the on-the-goes to attendees and answering questions. This year, the outreach team has added the assistance of some support specialists, which are the former toll collectors. Our outreach team is a vital link between MDTA Easy Pass, Drive Easy Maryland, and the general public working to increase the number of Easy Pass customers while dispelling any confusion surrounding tolling in Maryland. We look forward to continuing to engage with the public to provide the on-the-goes and work to increase Easy Pass usage in Maryland. I'm also proud to share with the board that MDTA Police, under the leadership of Colonel Kevin Anderson, was part of a multi-agency law enforcement operation that resulted in 93 fugitives being arrested. Operation Washout focused on wanted, violent offenders and gang members in the Baltimore, Maryland area. The operation, led by the Capital Area Regional Fugitive Task Force and the Baltimore Police Department's Warrant Apprehension Task Force, was carried out over a 2-week period in July. In addition to the MDTA police, other agencies that participated in the Operation Washout included the FBI, ATF, Department of Homeland Security Investigations, Maryland State Police, Howard County Police, Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, and Annapolis Police Department. I also want to take a moment and recognize the promotions of 4 MDTA police officers who were promoted to the rank of corporal. The 2021 promotional ceremony was held on August 11th. Corporal Paul Pastoret, Corporal Tyler Sheldon, Corporal Joy Taleb, and Corporal Timothy Denny II all were promoted to first-line supervisors, which brings with it additional responsibilities and leadership. Lastly, as part of our continuing recognition of MDTA's 50th anniversary, we'll soon be adding to the MDTA's website a series of short videos, historical photos, and a timeline, and a virtual toll booth tool for the purpose of preserving and sharing our history with the public. And we're putting the finishing touches on that project right now. That, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And
Any questions for Jim from the board? Great report, a lot of good stuff happening. At this point, our agenda is complete. So do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Took me the whole meeting to figure that out. Motion carries. Our meeting is now concludes the meeting of the MDTA board at 11:28 a.m. I'll get a half an hour back of your life.
Everybody have a great